Right, so closing Soundcaster now. Right, okay, so this is my Wise project for the game Shattered Pixel Dungeon. The game is a dungeon progression game. It has 5 stages: sewers, prison, cave, dwarven metropolis, and demon halls. And each stage has 5 levels to it, with the 5th being the boss level. Once you die in this game, you are dead, so it goes back to level 1, which will be shown in the Soundcaster when I go through it. What I'm going to do today is go through my my work unit here, show you everything that's in there, how it's all set up. Same with the events, which will be also shown in the Soundcaster, and then also the states and the game parameters and how they all work. So, audio, this is where we stick all of the audio that we want to be in the game. I've got music switch containers here containing various things. Death only contains the death, but that'll become relevant in a bit of why I've just put it once instead of every single level. It just switches to that instead, which is nice and easy when death occurs. Levels are all in here. These are all of the playlists for various stages. The V meaning victory. One shots. The gong sounds at every stage, at the start of every stage. It's sort of an auditory trigger for the player that they have started on a new stage. Player states. That's everything that can be applied to the player through enemies, traps, whatever mechanics. Give them that. And then finally the transitions, which are unique to each level, each stage rather. Realistically, the transitions, player states and deaths, these are all stingers / one shots, but for the purpose of organisation, I've put them all in separate ones. Moving on to the game syncs now. So we have 2 sorts of game parameters: boss vicinity. So this obviously only applies on the boss levels. Stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The boss vicinity is there. Player health, very straightforward and self-explanatory. The states, the levels which are assigned and mapped to the playlist containers there. And the player states are all here, and they are also mapped to all of the playlists in this switch container here. So you can see that here. This is where labeling obviously became really important. So if I was going to do a level 1 playlist container here, and I wanted to apply it to level 1 state, naming those the same thing just made it really straightforward and easy. Same with the player states, the same names, make it nice and easy. Transitions, we didn't need any paths or mapping for them, just because when we go into the levels and we go into transitions here, that's where this is applied. So obviously 1 to 5 has the 1 to 5 transition, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and 16 to 12, obviously. Your death here, this is just the death sequence. This is what sounded as you die. The extra level to the whole death mechanic, death sequence is, firstly, if we go to RTCPs on the levels, the levels is if you want to imagine sort of the base layer of the soundscape, that's always playing. Whatever level they're on, they will have a music piece to that level. And the low pass filter is what I've chosen to be applied to the level music as the player's health decreases, and you will be able to hear that later when we do a run through. Another thing that comes through is if we go on to the player states and we go on to, where is it, low health, we have a heartbeat. And this heartbeat has, let me just has this here as the RTCP. So the volume is increased as the health is decreased, if that makes sense. So I think that's how everything is linked up and how everything is sorted. The events is what we'll run through now on here, because that's what all of these are on here. These are all events. These ones on here, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5, was the purpose of just workflow. So if I wanted to get to level 17, instead of me going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on, I could just click level 14, which will level 4, stage 4 rather, which will put you on to level 16, and then I could just transition over to level 17. It just saved time. That was the purpose of that. So these just include setting the state, changing some RTCPs, and playing the player states, because that's the playlists that sound the grey ones down there. These are just your very simple changing the states, and the whole transition sequence is handled by the switch container and the transitions on there. The boss movement, that's changing those RTCPs, having a little bit of a delay so you can hear what it sounds like, and then it fades out again. That will become self-explanatory once we get through that. And the boss victory, again, that's just setting the parameter back to 0 for the sake of organisation, and then it's going to be playing the victory sequence. These are all just setting the states to bleeding, because at this point this state is in the switch container of player states, which is which is there, and then it's just a case of setting the state to whatever trigger we wanted, and then we put it back to neutral after, so we can play another one. The death one's a little bit more complicated. So you have that slow decrease in health, which is what this is here. Fade time over 5 seconds. We stop the level switch container, because the level, we're no longer in a level, we are dead. The health goes back to normal just for the sake of organisation, and we play the death sequence and set the state to dead. Low on health is similar to the boss movement one, with just changing the RTCPs up and down. So that's how everything's programmed and everything's set up. We'll have a run through now of the Soundcaster, just to hear what everything sounds like, and I can explain some artistic choices. So we start on level 1, stage 1. Stage 1 being the sewers. Obviously, if I was just doing a run through myself, I'd click stage 1, because then it isolates this whole level instead of having the continuous movement. But for this case, we'll run through that, and I'll actually show how these can be used when I do the death sequence. So there's your gong right at the start. Here it is, trigger, gong. And we're into the music now. So if I was going to draw a heat map of the intensity of the music, it would sort of be redder towards this corner of the rectangle and less so on this side. I felt that this was appropriate due to obviously the bosses being on this side. They need to have some intensity towards them, but towards the start of the stages we need less intensity, and shallower up in the dungeon, less intensity. So that's why it kind of goes more intense in this bottom corner. We'll listen to the first transition, so obviously unique to each stage. The transitions, looking at some gameplay, tend to happen every couple of minutes. That's how long a player will spend on a level. So to prevent them getting too monotonous and too repetitive, that's why we've kept each level different. I feel like having them all the same in the same level kind of creates an overall soundscape for that stage. but making sure that they change on each stage stops it, as I said, getting too repetitive and monotonous. So on to level 3. So the structure of the soundtracks are evolutionary. They sort of reveal themselves as you progress through the stages. The first levels will be very simple, very easy, very sort of background music, and then as we progress through the stages, that soundtrack will develop layers and movement and momentum as you go through each stage. So on to level 4. There you go. So we heard at the start, level 1, we had some synths and some rhythmic things. Level 2 added another synth. Level 3 added some rhythm, and then level 4 added some melodies. We'll look at some of these now. So these are just triggers, one-shots. And you'll see these on the other video, which is all of this applied to actual gameplay. So you can see how that's burning, how they work. Caustic goo. We'll save the others for in a bit. Go on to level 5. So this is the first boss, and the boss is called Goo. So I liked to have a bit of contrast between the main level, 1 to 4 on each stage, and then the 5th level being its own standalone thing. So we have the increasing layers from 1 to 4, and then the sudden drawback and the sudden drop down kind of tells the player this is something unique. And we'll have the boss movement now, so this is how the intensity is ramped up once you get closer to the boss. The vicinities of the boss obviously controls that soundtrack, so as soon as you get onto this level, you could be right up in the boss's face and fighting for the duration of the level, in which case you would have that drum loop come up and stay up as you fight the boss. So this is the victory now. Nice one. And then the stage 2 will be triggered once the player goes through the door, the stairs, whatever entrance it is to the next stage. So I'll hear that now. Level 6. The gong at the start. And going back to sort of a soundscape rather than anything rhythmic at this point. And then to hear the unique sound transition for stage 2. Cool, we'll listen to some more of these now. So Charmed sounds like this. Crippled. Frozen. Hunger. Marked for sacrifice. Paralyzed. And we'll save the last one for the next stage. On to level 8. So with the game being visually pixelated and very much along the 8-bit theme, we tried to echo that and emphasise that in the soundtrack as well. A lot of these samples, loops, instruments are put through a Redux plugin on Ableton, which just allows you to change the sample rate and bit depth. So on to level 9. I think the term that people gave 8-bit sort of music is chip music, obviously due to the chips that they were produced on in old school games. The melody comes in here, similar structure to the first stage, and we'll see that again in stage 3, but then stage 4 and stage 5, they're a bit unique, so we'll go into some explanations about them. So on stage 10, this is Tengu. That shouldn't be on 0. This is what your boss movement sounds like. So what that is doing is moving the stage 2 boss RTCP up and down. I don't know why it wasn't visualising it up on the top. You can hear that that's what it sounds like. And then on to the boss 2 victory. Cool, and now on to stage 3, and what we'll do is we'll show the health on this one. So this is the caves. Really tried to show this through the synths and the reverb, and using this particular sound, the plucky sound, kind of gave it that open space feel. Let me just have a look at level 11, see if it is just one. Okay, so there's a second version here, which comes in after one playthrough of the first version. Okay, so on to level 12. Some of that electronic modulation that you can hear in the bass is kind of a nod towards the boss on this level, which is BM300, which is a robot themselves. And this is what the low on health sounds like now. And then also to audition the death sequence. And if this was a real game, back to the main menu and try again. But in this case, through the beauty of technology, we can just skip straight on. What were we on? We were on 12, weren't we? So this is where these come in handy. So I'll just be able to skip the whole of stage 1 and stage 2 by jumping in at this point, and we'll hop over to level 13 now. So a couple more layers coming in at level 13, ramping up the tension a bit. And to listen to a few more of these, so we've got Poisoned, Rooted, Slowed, Vertigo, and Weakened. Cool. On to level 14. So level 14 has 2 versions, as you can see. So we'll hear this one for 1 loop, and then we'll infinitely go on to the second version. That melody sound that you can hear there, and that's used quite a lot throughout the whole soundtrack, and it was used using a chiptune plugin, which synthesizes music in the same way that they used to in the old chips, so very authentic sound. Cool, and then the drums coming in for the second variation of 14, and we'll move on to 15. So this is now where introductions are introduced to the soundtrack. On level 15 we did have an introduction at the start, and now we'll be on to 2 sections which will behave a certain way, and we can have a look at that now. So your intro's there, and then between the main and the bridge, or variation 1 and variation 2, these will loop 1 each. So it's just keeping the variation in the soundtrack and keeping it entertaining. And we'll hear the boss movement. So we've got those war drums coming up, which are similar to the previous stages. And onto the victory. So the victory music was inspired quite a lot by Super Mario Bros. How they have the same victory music on all of the castles, and it's a sequence that probably a lot of gaming fans would be able to sing back to you. So that was the idea of these. You get very used to and very hopefully fond of what the victory music is for the first 4 stages, and then there's something special lying for that last one. So you've got, you know, the expectation for these stages, and then bang, you finished the game, which, trust me, is really hard. And it just gives you that extra sort of dopamine boost at the end. Cool, so on to level 16. So this is the Dwarven Metropolis. King of Dwarves is the boss. And king being, you know, history would say that the king is appointed by the Lord. So I thought some choir samples would go really nicely and would kind of point towards what's to come. Again, we heard in level 16 there that you have one variation, and then on the second variation the strings come in. Now to hear the unique transition for stage 4. We've got some more legato strings coming in at level 17. Still not really turning up the momentum and the tension, but it does come by level 19. So on to 18. So now we've got some rhythmic elements coming through, kind of giving the player a little bit more of a push. Probably a sense to hurry up and that the game's quicker and more action-packed. And then moving on to 19. Again, there's two variations on 19. So things such as the transition between the levels and the killing of the boss, or the defeating of the boss, that is very much dependent on what the player does. So when I'm looking at the transitions, they're put down as immediate. We try and fade out the previous soundtrack, make it sound as seamless as we possibly can. So that's the B section of level 19. And then on to level 20. So now we're really driving home that King of Dwarves sound. So that's your intro. And we've got some war music at the start here, kind of keeping that sense of combat. And again, the health can be applied to all of them. So you can hear that coming in there. And this is the B section. So we're really getting into the combat and the momentum now. And then to listen to the boss movement, so as you get closer, there's some synths that come up over the top, you'll hear now. And we'll go on to the boss for victory. Cool. So that is the last time that you'll hear that victory music. Obviously these could be sounding a little bit more repetitive as they normally would, because I think the full playthrough that I saw of this game was pushing 2 hours. So these happen quite indefinitely. So we'll get on to level 21 now. So this is for stage 5, which is Demon Halls. And the boss is called Yogdrua. So obviously with a name like Demon Halls, you expect the level to look quite demonic, and the music to show that as well. So I found that a lot of sort of horror movie-esque sounds worked really nicely. Go on to level 22. Something that I forgot to mention as well, which I haven't got in my notes here, is these increase in tempo as you go down. Obviously meant to give that sense of eagerness, and sort of the clock is ticking against you. There is no clock mechanic in the game, but I thought it would be quite nice to include. And then once you get back to stage 5, then the tempo drops back down to 120, so it's 120, 30, 40, 50, and back down to 120. Just trying to make this stage feel unique and sort of grand and important. You know, you've got its own tempo, its own transition music, its own victory music. Because this is hard to get to, stage 5. On to level 22. Sorry, we're on 22. Level 23. So level 22 did have 2 variations that you might have heard. We're on to level 23 now. Nice one, on to level 24. So level 24 has 2 variations, which you'll hear now. This erratic sort of sounding drums can sort of increase that sense of urgency and momentum. And then just to add another layer, we have that synth coming in the second variation. Nice, and we'll go on to the final boss now. So we've just faded it out onto level 25. Again, adding the individuality and the uniqueness of this whole stage, with it being the finale. And then we have a creepy sounding atmospheric soundscape that comes up as an introduction for level 25. Those plucks, obviously a lot of reverb put on them, but then bouncing down or freezing the tracks, we were able to then reverse that reverb tail and put it in front of the note to add a bit of a sort of an alien-like spooky sound. And we're on to the main sequence. We'll do the boss movement now. We've already got war drums in the level 25, so adding a higher, sort of a topper for the boss I thought was appropriate. So this main section that you hear now isn't actually a main section, it repeats twice, and then we bring back that drama that we found in the choir, which you'll hear in a bit, and then we'll audition the boss 5 victory and finish off the demonstration. So this is intended to really give the feel of this is the final stand, this is it. You're nearly at the end after investing hours of your time. Cool, and let's audition the boss 5 victory and the final one, and the unique victory sequence. And again, there's that melody using that chip plugin that I mentioned before. There we go. So I hope that's given you a good overview of my musical choices, how everything fits together, how I put it all into Wwise, and how it can be applied to the game. And then to actually see it being applied to the game, you can have a look at the other video. Cool.